privileged to have a young man visiting our city, mainly because of our high schools, Larry Cappetto, and you have had a great impact on our city through our high schools. You like veterans, and you've been spending a lot of years of your life, and you're still a very young man. I can say that.
Bless you. Bless you.
But you decided some time ago you were deeply interested in capturing the stories of men and women who've served our country. Does that sum up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How did you decide you were interested in that?
Well, you know, when I found out what I was doing, which was recording pieces of history, I've interviewed about 1,000 veterans over the last 9 years across North America, including Canada. And what started as a personal project in Phoenix, Arizona in 2003 has now evolved into an international venture for myself. So I find myself on this incredible journey, an educational journey, interviewing veterans who've served our country, World War II veterans, Korean War veterans, Vietnam veterans, those serving today, men and women, and compiling a documentary series called Lest They Be Forgotten.
Which is shown on PBS.
Yes, a lot of the PBS channels. It's a public television documentary series. And you know, being in San Angelo today is one stop on my journey, and this is the first, really, the fall kickoff for this school year. But and I've had a great time here. But what I'm seeing here is the same as I'm seeing across the country. We have a generation of young people that, for the most part, don't know a lot about the freedoms that we have or the price for the freedoms that we have. So I've taken it and made it my job to really help educate them with the programs that I do in the schools, which we've done here successfully today and tomorrow. And the kids are great. You know, our kids, they almost need to be taught some of these things because our history books aren't reporting it anymore. There's not a whole lot about the World War II, the Korean War, which is referred to as a forgotten war, which I've done a film on. My father served during the Korean War.
And mine too.
So kind of answer your question, getting me involved with that. My uncle was in World War II with General Patton's Third Army. But just my love for my country, the passion for my country, the history. I'm a history nut, I guess. I'm not a nut, but I love history. And you know, that combined with some of my musical skills and talents and abilities. I've been in video production for a number of years. I've done a lot with my life, but this by far is the most meaningful and most purposeful thing I've ever done. And what an honor to sit across the room from a veteran of, let's say, World War II. I'm that close to touching history. I mean, literally that close. When these men and women die, their stories go with them, and then we lose them. So I've made it my job to find and record these stories before it's too late. I've been very successful in my work because I provide a very non-threatening environment where these veterans can open up and tell me their stories.
And many, including my father who served World War II in Korea, didn't just automatically feel comfortable for decades telling stories and details of the pain that they went through. How are you getting them to open up?
Good question. I've been successful in my work because I provide, like I said, a very non-threatening environment for our veterans to open up and tell me their stories. And it's very humbling when a family member will tell me after an interview, he said, Larry, you know, my father's never told me this story before, or a wife will tell me that. And it's like I pinch myself and I say, why me, Lord? You know, what is it? But I think what means more to these veterans than anything, Carol Ann, is that that somebody's taken the time to care and to listen to their stories. I've really, what I like to say, I've practiced the fine art of listening well. I'm a great listener. And I think that's attractive to people, somebody that can really listen.
Well, okay, I have a preconceived notion. Let's see if I'm on target. When they open up to you, are they mostly talking about their achievements or other things, men in their group or the people that in the countries where they served?
Well, you know, I don't have a set of questions. It's pretty much, it's very unrehearsed. So when I ask them a question, some veterans will talk for a half hour, some will just answer the question and I ask the next one. But mainly what I'm after and help answer this question is they tell me a personal story, a very personal story of I'll ask them about the night before a major invasion, the morning of walk me into the beaches of Omaha Beach Landing, walk me into the sands of Iwo Jima when you got off those Higgins boats, tell me what it was like jumping off the helicopter in Vietnam, or what it was like going up to the Chosin Reservoir in Korea and, you know, 30, 40 below zero, snowing and fighting for your country. You know, it's like I guess when I talk to these veterans, it's like I try to slow it down. It's like I relive the experience with them, you know. I've interviewed a lot of veterans who have post-traumatic stress disorders, and people have told me I have echo PTSD, which I'm not going to say I do, but something happens when they're talking to me. It's like they communicate a little part of themselves with me. This is kind of the personal side of my work. And there's a camaraderie that I share with them as they shared with their comrades in war and in combat. They've told me that the bonds that are forged in combat are closer than even a family. You know, that they're with these people all the time, you know. And then it's heart-wrenching when your buddy dies in your arms, you lose your friends, you come back home. You know, our Vietnam vets came back home so fast. One Vietnam veteran told me they came home so fast, you know, 24 hours earlier they're in combat, and 36 hours later, 48 hours later, they're at home. And one guy said, you know, he still had Vietnam dirt under his fingernails at the dinner table. They came home too fast in Vietnam, and they didn't have time to transition like in World War II. They came home on ships, they had time to talk. You know, they were deployed as individuals, usually in Vietnam. So, but anyways, it's very therapeutic to tell a traumatic event. And the Veterans Administration has got a copy of my Vietnam film in every VA hospital in this country because they feel it has therapeutic value. And that's common with all my films. You know, as these combat veterans hear other veterans talk about their experiences, they feel like it's okay to open up. And because of that, there's been a lot of healing. So, tremendous.
Is there a central theme when you interview someone for a dissertation? You see if I can find some common themes in all the interviews that I did at schools. What are some central themes?
Well, two common things that come to mind with that question are war is hell and freedom's not free. Those are the two common threads in every interview. It's interesting studying the wars. World War II, we came together as a country. We were united. We were attacked at Pearl Harbor. The next day, we declare war in Japan, and we're fighting in Europe. You know, and it's just tremendous. And yet, the war effort, we became united at that time. The Korean War wasn't quite as popular, if there's a popular war. A lot of politics. Vietnam, extremely a lot of politics. I stay away from the politics, but you know what I see in all the people I've interviewed, even those serving today, I see a call to duty. I see a spirit that is just, they don't badmouth the president, we have a job to do, we're going to do it. Now over here they may have their opinion, but with me, we don't get into the politics of war. You know, nobody likes war, nobody wants war, but sometimes we have to do things, you know, and that's how one World War II veteran said it to me. You know, my life's different today, and how can we thank our veterans enough for what they've done for our country?
We can't.
We
It's
owe them
impossible.
a great debt. We owe them a great debt.
So, what is your next project?
Well, really, I'm finishing up a project on 9/11. I was in New York City. I interviewed 24 survivors of the World Trade Center attacks several weeks ago. These were the men and women that were inside the towers, trapped in the towers, the first responders that responded that morning. And I told the kids this morning at Central High School, I said, you know, when I was talking to these survivors, I felt like I was interviewing one of my veterans because what they were describing were the horrors of war. The body parts, the people jumping out of the buildings, you know, the most amazing things. You're not prepared for these things. You know, a lot of these men that I interviewed in World War II at the end of the war, they liberated concentration camps. I did a film on the Holocaust. You know, they were trained for battle, for combat. They saw their friends die in war, but they were not prepared for what they saw at Buchenwald and Auschwitz and all these concentration camps. But, you know, nobody wants to go through combat, you know. And, you know, we've lost so many lives, and that's what I try to communicate to our young people today is that, you know, I challenge them with this thought like I did today. And what we're about ready to do is that, you know, you're born in a free country. You know, if I asked you what freedom means to you, how would you answer that? It's interesting. When I ask a veteran what freedom means or what the flag means, that's when they start to cry. But you ask a young person today, it's not because they're ignorant or don't care, they just haven't learned. Think about it. But if they lost their freedoms, like on 9/11 when we were attacked, for a moment there, our country came together again. We put out our flags, we did all this stuff. Sadly, there's a big disconnect now with that. We had the 10-year anniversary, but still, our country's like, what's next? It's like a fad, you know, and that's why I'm doing my work, is to help us to remember. If we don't remember, we're going to forget.
That's what I was going to ask you. You have to have a driving force why you want to talk to high school kids, they are some of my favorite people. Though they're thinking, they want to understand what you have experienced.
Absolutely.
And when you only have them a brief amount of time, and that is what you essentially want them to feel, what you have taken a decade or more interviewing. You have all of this, and how do you transmit that to a group of young people who are thinking about their next meal, or that their shoes are not as nice as their neighbors, because there's a lot of poverty. Mm-hmm. So you clearly have gotten their attention.
It's a blessing. I mean, I have an open door into our schools. You know, when CBS did a story with me recently, and one of the things that the reporter, the correspondent said was that, let me get back to the kids at the schools too. I remember my thought there, but when I started my work, this is what I want to say. When I started my work 10 years ago, I said the world doesn't necessarily need another documentary. What's going to be different about my work? So two things came to mind. Was number one, it has to come from the source. It has to come from the veterans. And I've been true to that. I've allowed them to tell their stories without any narration or editorial commentary. And that's not common in a traditional documentary. Secondly, I knew the day was going to come where I'm going to share this with our younger generations. And I'm in that day now. That's the part of my work now. My focus is education. Helping our young kids learn what our veterans went through. You know, and they get that. When I have a presentation, you can hear a pin drop. In fact, the teacher said it again today. I've never seen our kids so quiet or reverent during a program. And we heard it. There was nothing. And it's just, I guess that's a testament to what the program is all about. But, you know, when I remember what I was going to say about CBS. I want the kids to feel like they're me on the other end of the camera, you know, getting that emotional side, getting that personal story, going down those rope ladders, you know, landing on those beaches. And that's true for all people that watch my films. And my hope is that they will come away with a greater appreciation for all veterans and the freedoms that we have in our country.
Well, I'm thrilled to death that we were blessed enough to get you into West Texas, and which may be a first. Is it?
I've been to Dallas, Houston, but I've never been to West Texas.
No, they're not West Texas.
Yeah. Well, y'all talk a little bit different than they do over there.
Yes,
over
we
yonder,
do.
But
I'm
having a good time.
Well, I want to thank you. This city thanks you, and I know these young people will look back on what you have taught them and be different and think differently about their freedom. That's what I hope.
Well, my hope is too. And I had a young gentleman come up to me after the program today, and I shook his hand, and he's a senior at Central High School. And he was just thanking me for my program. And I said, Mike, I said, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? And he said, I have absolutely no idea. And I said, well, maybe you heard something today that will put you on the right path. We shook hands, I gave him a hug, and we took a picture with him. And if I can motivate or encourage a young person today, you know, that's powerful. And when you see tears in the eyes of a teenager, you've touched them.
Yes, you have. And I know you have, or they wouldn't have been quiet. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate
Thank you for coming to West Texas.
Well, I'll be back.
Woo!
I'll be back.